Hello everyone, welcome back to the Human Observation Lab. I'm New York, your host and observer of the fascinating structures behind human behavior. Today, we have a particularly interesting topic to dissect.
Hi there, I'm Juan, and I'm really curious about today's topic. What are we looking at?
Today, we'll be analyzing the psychological structures behind a concept called Tokowaka, or eternal youth, recently introduced by Japan's Liberal Democratic Party as part of their 70th anniversary vision. But more importantly, we'll examine why institutions obsess over rebranding and what this reveals about human psychology.
Eternal youth? That sounds like something from a fantasy novel. Not politics. What exactly does it mean?
Let me explain the background. The Liberal Democratic Party of Japan, or LDP, recently celebrated its 70th anniversary. To mark this occasion, they announced a new vision expressing the essence of conservative politics as Tokowaka, which translates to eternal youth or always young.
So they're saying they want to stay young forever? That's an interesting choice of words for a 70-year-old political party.
Precisely. The concept originates from an ancient Japanese word meaning eternal youth and longevity. The party explains it as inheriting tradition while constantly renewing oneself. They're attempting to frame the paradox of conservation and innovation as a single, unified concept.
Wait, so they're saying we stay the same by changing? That sounds contradictory. How can you preserve tradition and constantly renew yourself?
That contradiction is exactly what makes this psychologically fascinating. This is not unique to the LDP. Institutions worldwide employ similar rhetorical strategies. The question is, why does this type of messaging appeal to human psychology?
I feel like I've seen this pattern before. Companies do this too, right? Like when they say we're going back to our roots while also saying we're innovating for the future.
Excellent observation, Juan. This pattern appears across politics, corporations, religions, and even educational institutions. Before we analyze why, let's look at another related news item that provides context. Around the same time, we saw statements from government officials about monetary policy being one option regarding currency markets. This careful, non-committal language is another example of institutional communication designed to maintain flexibility while appearing decisive.
So how did people actually react to this Tokowaka announcement? I imagine there were mixed feelings.
Indeed. The reactions fell into several distinct patterns. First, there was confusion. Many people didn't understand what Tokowaka meant, as it's an obscure classical Japanese term.
That makes sense. I had never heard that word before today. It sounds almost like they're trying too hard to sound sophisticated.
Second, there was skepticism. Critics pointed out the apparent contradiction between a 70-year-old institution talking about eternal youth. Some viewed it as an attempt to deflect criticism about the party's age and need for actual reform.
I can understand that feeling. It's like when a company says, "We're listening to you," but doesn't actually change anything. The words feel hollow.
Third, and most interestingly, there was a small group who responded positively to the aesthetic and philosophical appeal of the concept. They appreciated the attempt to articulate a vision, even if they disagreed with the politics.
So some people were drawn to the poetry of it, regardless of whether they trusted the party. That's fascinating.
Now let's dissect the psychological mechanisms at play. The first key concept is what psychologists call the framing effect. This refers to how the presentation of information influences our decisions and judgments, rather than the information itself.
Framing effect. So it's about how you frame or present something. Like putting a nice frame around an ordinary picture?
Exactly. Consider this classic example from behavioral economics. When medical treatment is described as having a 90% survival rate, people react more positively than when it's described as having a 10% mortality rate, even though the facts are identical.
Oh wow, that's the same thing described differently. So Tokowaka is like framing the need for change as eternal youth, rather than we're getting old and need to fix things?
Precisely. Eternal youth has positive connotations: vitality, renewal, hope. We need reform because we've become stagnant has negative connotations: failure, decline, criticism. By choosing the Tokowaka frame, they transform a potential admission of weakness into an aspirational vision.
That's really clever, actually. But does it actually work on people? I feel like I can see through it.
Here's the crucial point. Even when we intellectually understand the framing, it still affects us emotionally. This is what we call the affect heuristic. Our emotional response to words and concepts influences our judgment, often below our conscious awareness.
So even if I think this is just marketing, the positive feeling from eternal youth still subtly influences me?
Yes. The word youth triggers associations with energy, potential, and optimism. These associations don't disappear just because we're aware of them. This is why institutions invest so heavily in rebranding. The emotional framing creates a buffer against criticism. The second major psychological mechanism here is cognitive dissonance. This occurs when people hold conflicting beliefs or when their behavior conflicts with their beliefs, creating psychological discomfort.
Cognitive dissonance. I think I've heard of this. It's that uncomfortable feeling when things don't match up, right?
Correct. Now consider this. Humans generally want two contradictory things from institutions. We want stability and tradition, something reliable that won't change unexpectedly. But simultaneously, we want innovation and progress, improvement and adaptation to new circumstances.
That's so true. I want my bank to be innovative with technology, but I also want it to be completely stable and safe with my money. Those feel contradictory.
This creates cognitive dissonance. How can we trust something that's both traditional and innovative? The concept of Tokowaka is designed to resolve this dissonance by framing the contradiction as a harmonious unity. Eternal youth means changing to stay the same.
So it's giving people permission to want both things at once? Like saying you don't have to choose?
Exactly. It provides psychological relief from the tension of opposing desires. This is a powerful technique because it addresses a real psychological need, the discomfort of holding contradictory preferences.
But isn't that kind of manipulative? I mean, you can't actually have everything both ways in reality.
That's an important ethical question. From an analytical perspective, we can observe that all communication involves some degree of framing. The question is whether the framing accurately represents reality or creates unrealistic expectations. In this case, the Tokowaka concept may create what we call illusory compatibility, the appearance that opposing forces are naturally harmonious when in reality, trade-offs exist. Let's consider the broader implications. We see this pattern everywhere in modern society. Companies rebrand, political parties reinvent their image, even educational institutions talk about preserving tradition while innovating for the future.
It does feel like everyone is trying to be timeless yet modern these days. Is this getting worse?
Several factors are intensifying this phenomenon. First, the speed of social change has accelerated. Institutions feel pressure to appear adaptable. Second, trust in institutions has declined globally, creating greater need for image management.
So they're working harder on their image because people trust them less? That creates an interesting cycle.
Indeed. And third, social media has created an environment where messaging must be constantly refreshed to maintain attention. The concept of Tokowaka itself is designed to be shareable. It's poetic, mysterious, and invites discussion.
We're literally discussing it right now. So even questioning it becomes part of its spread.
Precisely. This is what some analysts call engagement through ambiguity. When a concept is slightly unclear, people discuss it to understand it, which spreads it further. The confusion becomes a feature, not a bug.
That's both brilliant and slightly concerning. What should regular people do with this knowledge?
The most important skill is what we might call structural literacy, the ability to see the psychological architecture behind messages. When you encounter institutional messaging, ask yourself, what psychological need is this addressing? What framing is being used? What contradictions is it trying to resolve?
So instead of just accepting or rejecting the message, we understand why it's constructed that way.
Exactly. This doesn't mean becoming cynical about all messaging. Rather, it means engaging with communication more consciously, appreciating effective framing while remaining aware of its effects on our judgment.
I think I understand now. Tokowaka isn't just a weird word choice. It's a sophisticated psychological tool that addresses real human needs for both stability and change. Whether it's effective depends on how people receive it.
You've grasped the essence, Juan. The key insight is this: institutions don't just communicate information, they communicate psychological structures designed to resonate with our cognitive patterns. Understanding these structures helps us navigate the modern information landscape more effectively.
This has been really eye-opening. I'll never look at corporate or political messaging the same way again.
And that is the goal of the Human Observation Lab, to see the invisible structures that shape our world. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, keep observing, keep questioning, and remember, every message has a structure waiting to be understood.